Microsoft Word 2003 formatting paragraphs. I know. It's not as exciting as taking fonts and changing the color, adding little boxes that blink lights at them. But your paragraphs, if you know anything about English composition, is the main ideas that you are putting in your documents. And so you want to be able to format them to draw attention to them or to isolate them so people are focusing on them or whatever reasoning you might have. Paragraphs can be separate and you can do all kinds of different things with them. Let's see how in this video. In this video, we are going to take a look at how we can format our paragraphs. Paragraphs are actually pretty important. They're what separate your text from one idea to another. Remember your old English, right? And maybe 12th grade or 11th grade English, hopefully earlier, you learned that what paragraphs do when you're writing text. Well, we can format our paragraphs with indentation by using certain types of indents. We can use alignment. We align the text to the left or to the right, and even borders and shading, which really help to take whatever text you have, put a border or some shading on it to really bring it to the forefront of your documentation. So to get started, we probably should define what exactly is a paragraph, because if we're going to be talking about formatting paragraphs, you should probably understand what a paragraph is. Now, there are some different definitions by people, but pretty much simply, a paragraph is going to be a sentence or series of sentences that is ended by a hard carriage return. In other words, you hit the enter key. And that's how Word looks at it. They say if I, for example, here's my customer response 3 letter. I'm typing up to Dan here about his tuba. We've seen this letter before. We've had pictures and things to it. And so I went ahead and just started typing text, and then I hit enter. In fact, if you want to see the end of every paragraph, all you need to do is hit the show hide paragraph markers here. When I do that, it shows me what are my paragraphs. Now here's where things get a little freaky by people. In other words, this right here, ignore the little information thing, we'll talk about that later, but notice I've got a paragraph return here. Every time you see one of these markers using the show hide here, that means that you type some text and you hit enter on the keyboard. This is considered a paragraph. This is considered a paragraph. This is considered a paragraph. And even hitting enter right here, these are separate paragraphs. Now, that might freak you out a little bit. I know it did me in the beginning, because I always thought paragraphs look more like this down here, where you've got a couple of sentences or at least a couple of lines. No, it's just anytime you type text and hit enter, okay? I think we're pretty clear on that. So that way when we talk about the paragraph formatting, you will understand what we're referring to, and that makes a lot more sense. Okay, so let's go ahead and hide these for right now. Now, the thing that you're going to want to do is control things like indenting, spacing. Maybe you want to put borders or maybe some shading to these paragraphs, and that's how you can format the paragraphs. Now, anytime you look up here at the top, you'll see you have some markers here. Now, each one of these markers means something. They're the indent markers for your paragraphs. So here you can see if I roll it over on the top one, that little down pointing arrow, that's the first line indent. The second one is your hanging indent, and then finally you have your left indent, which is the total left indentation for your entire documentation. So you can see all these different things that are put into place. Now you also have over here, way over here, hiding by itself, is the right indent. So this is how far in from the right-hand side your text is going to stay when you're typing. So now that we know a little bit about that, and I know it's a little bit of theory just to put there, but this really controls how your text wraps, and when you hit enter, the behavior of the next paragraph that you're typing. So you can add space between paragraphs. We can just, like here, if you notice, let me hit the paragraph thing. All I did was I hit enter and I hit enter again, and it went ahead and created another line. Now I did that manually, but I can adjust the spacing before and after paragraphs. In other words, I can use the paragraph dialog box, and as we're going to see momentarily, and say anytime you hit enter, it automatically adds 12 spaces between the last time you type the text. So there's a lot of things we can do based upon how these indents are set, and we're going to see how like this. If you want to indent the paragraph, maybe, let's say we'll go right here, and we want to make this paragraph right here. So I triple click it and I get my whole paragraph, and I say, look, I want to put the left indent a little bit more in. So I take my mouse, select it, move it in, and now watch this. Look at how the entire paragraph has left indented. And notice anytime you drag the bottom one, the top two will go ahead and indent as well. Now if I want, I can come over here, grab the right indent, and it will then create a right indent only for this paragraph. Notice these guys aren't affected at all. So as long as I select this entire paragraph or select anywhere within that paragraph, any changes I make to these arrows, these indent markers, it's going to be taking place right up here live and in real time. So that's the left and right indents. Now, what about these other ones? We've got the first line indent and the hanging indent. Well, the first line indent allows you to maybe move your indent in a little bit. For example, if I want to do this on my first line indent, I can say now only the first line is going to be moved. See, my first line indents in a little bit. You can then make the second and subsequent lines indent even more. This is what is known as a hanging indent. So if I move this, notice it grabs both of them. See how it now moves it in a little bit more than your first line. Now if I come over here and I use these existing indents and I hit enter, notice I hit enter and it dropped down and created my next first line. So I can now type in some more text. I can say, this is the second paragraph I'm typing. Here we will see what a hanging indent looks like. So depending on how you want your paragraphs to format, you can use the arrows up here and create these. And now remember, anytime you're in, I can now change this second paragraph to be different than this paragraph simply by clicking anywhere in that paragraph. And again, if I want to make sure I'm in a separate one, I just show this and yep, here I am, set up, ready to go. I can say, I know what, I want this one back all the way to the beginning. So maybe I want to bring this in line and bring this all the way back. Look what happened. It didn't affect any of the other paragraphs, only the paragraph that I'm in. And that's important because some people say, well, I want to do that here and I want to do that down here on this one, and why doesn't it change the whole page? That's because you are doing it on a paragraph formatting and not setting it up as a page formatting, which is separate, which we can show you a little bit later on. But here we can see we've set up our indents now for our paragraphs. And again, all this is just so we can help format and make our text do what we want when we word wrap, when we do our paragraph formatting. The next thing we're going to want to look at is the alignment that occurs within these particular paragraphs. Because right now, you'll notice that anytime you type text, it starts off with, it tries to align to the left margin. And it pretty much, except for the indents that we put on here, and we have a hanging indent, and that's why it kind of splits over here. But if you notice over here on the right-hand side, it really doesn't care where the word ends. It kind of tries to second guess. It won't go a little bit further than this, and then it will come down here, and it kind of looks kind of jagged on this end. That's what you would call a left alignment, or align left. Now, if I wanted to, right now, we'll go move down to this paragraph, if you have any questions paragraph. And let's say I don't want it to align to the left. In fact, I want it to align all the way over here to the right margin. So all I need to do is come up here and say align right. And when you do that, notice the entire paragraph will then align over here to the right. So it wants to match up. It's kind of like squishing everything over here to the right. You can also center it by simply clicking on the center, and that way the text starts from the beginning and spreads out until it hits the indents or the margins over here, and then it starts a new sentence from the beginning, or from the middle, I should say. Then you also have the ability to justify. Maybe I want everything to bump up against the left and bump up against the right in my paragraph. I simply click justify. As long as it has the ability to do so, as long as you have enough words, it will attempt to add maybe another space here, another space here, a little bit more character spacing to make sure that this end bumps up against the right and this end bumps up against the right. But down here, I don't have enough of those words, you know, those things, those words. I don't have enough words here to make sure that that sentence can stretch without making it look freakishly weird. So it just says, all right, we'll just make it look as comfortable as possible here, and it will bring you many years of enjoyment. Hit the end here at the end of our paragraph. So again, this is up here on the format toolbar. You can set the alignment for your paragraphs just simply by clicking on either one of these at all. Now, the other thing you can do is take a look at this. Let's say I go back here and we'll go ahead and go back to our left alignment, and I want to add spacing between my lines. Right now, we have your standard one space line spacing is 1. Line spacing you can do on the toolbar right here where it says line spacing. I can change it from 1 to 1.5 to 2 to 2.5 to 3. I mean, I can do a lot. Let's say I want to add 1.5 or make it 1.5 line spacing. So I go ahead and I click 1.5, and the entire paragraph again now has spacing that's 1.5. And of course you can, change this and bring it back or forward, back to 1 to 1.5, whatever you want it to be. And you can, you can make it look as tall or small as possible. The other thing that you can do, if you notice with this formatting, is maybe you want the spacing between paragraphs to change. Well, in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to literally go to the Format menu, and we're going to get more special features. Because just remember, like with font, if you look over here, font, you had a few features you could do. Then you hit Format and Font, and you got a lot more features. Typical Word and Office 2003 menu system. Let's click on Paragraph and see all the bells and whistles that we have. Indents and spacing. Here, you can specifically state where you want your left indentation, where you want your right. You can even do your first line and your hanging right here under Special, and how much you are going to place it off, the left or the right indentation. So here's our indentation. Here's our general, which is going to be our alignment, and we can say we want it left, centered, right, or justified. We looked at those. Outline level means literally, what if I'm doing an outline, let's say you're doing a table of contents or some sort of outline, you want body text as part of it, but then you can do different levels which will add different alignments. It will move it in. It will move the text in more right about here. So, depending on the different levels that you have with the outline. So you can do that as well. Spacing. This is big. You had the line spacing that you have, but you can do spacing before a paragraph and after a paragraph. Remember how I said I wanted to add, maybe when I hit return, I want it to look a little different? Let's try this. Let me go ahead and hit cancel. And right here, if I typed in, notice it says this is the second paragraph I'm typing, and we, obviously changed the hanging indent on it. But let's say I want to have space between the carriage return here. So again, let's show where it is. There's the carriage return. And I want a little bit before, and I want a little bit after. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this one. So that way I've got no space before, no space after. See that? But yet this is still considered a second paragraph. So let me turn that off. We'll go to Format, Paragraph, and now this time I'm going to say I want 12 points. You can do auto where it'll automatically bump it a little bit, but I'm going to want 12 points before. I want 12 points after. And within the body text, I want single line spacing. So when I click OK, look what it did. There's no second line. People go, why can't I click over here on the second line? By the way, here's a big gotcha. A lot of people will not unknowingly, because they've either selected a style with a certain type of paragraph, or they'll say, why can't I want to get rid of the spaces between the paragraphs. How do I do that? Well, any of the paragraphs that are doing this, click on it, select on it, go to Format, go to Paragraphing, and see if there's any spacing put there. A lot of people ignore this, and you shouldn't. So here you can put 0, 0. And now when I click OK, there it is. Now you have no spacing in between. Now again, you can hit Return. You can hit Return and just add a space yourself, or you can use the spacing under the Format menu in order to add that spacing between the two paragraphs. So let's go add a little bit more, I want to say, formatting that allows you to kind of make paragraphs stand out. This is a good way, just by changing the indents. And you obviously, if I'm reading this letter, if I'm Dan, I go, ooh, I wonder what he's talking about right here. Your eyes are just naturally drawn to this thing, and you're mesmerized by the miraculous use of indents. Well, maybe not, but at least your attention is drawn to it. Another way you can do it is by using borders and shading. Now, borders and shading are under your Format tools, under Borders and Shading, and all you need to do is come down here. Let's go ahead. I want Dan not only to concentrate on this particular paragraph, I want him to concentrate here, because here's where the telephone number is. So I'm going to go ahead and format the paragraph here with some borders and shading. So I hit Format, Borders and Shading, and it'll say, all right, what do you want to do? Do you want to add borders? In this case, I can do no border, which is what I have. I can put a box around it, And notice it gives you in the preview how you want it set up. This is one of my favorite. I like this one, shadow. It adds a drop shadow on the edge of your, it puts a box and then it adds the drop shadow here on the left and bottom, or excuse me, the right and bottom sides, and you can just see that that kind of adds a little more 3D texture to it. You can also create a 3D one where it just kind of pops it in. It makes it look like it's embedded inside the actual document. Or you can do a custom one where you can come and do colors and styles and shadows and anything else that you want to do. You also have options here as well. You can say, well, where do you want it from the text? You want the line 1 point, 1 point, 4 points, 4 points. That's how you can do the different shading options. So in this case, I'll do shadow. And I want this to apply to what? The whole paragraph? Or watch this. You can, since we have it selected this, if you select text, you can actually do borders and shading just around a certain line of text. But in this case, since we are doing paragraph, it is going to show up as paragraph. So let's say we want to add a shadow to it. You can also, if you want, add to the entire page a box. And it'll put it on the whole page. Back here, we'll have a box around the entire page. In this case, we'll just stick with none. You can also do the same options, by the way. Apply to the whole document, this section, first page only, all except the first page. So you have some options on how you want to do it when you do a page border. Then there's the shading, another very cool feature. You can choose to add shading behind your text. Nice, huh? So right now you have no fill back behind it. You can do a couple of patterns. You can do your grayscale, where you can do solid, which when you do solid, it will automatically change the font to white. Watch this. And so now when I do this and I click OK, notice it's now a black text, or excuse me, black background with white text. So you have that border shading. So we can come back up here to Format, Borders and Shading, and I don't want solid. Let's say I just want to add a nice 15% gray onto my bordered text for my paragraph. You can add different colors if you want. These are just standard patterns and styles are just grayscale. If you notice, you can just go down here, and then you can add things like patterns, like trellis, dark horizontal. You can do dark down diagonal. You can do all kinds of different things all under here. One of the best ones that I found to attract attention is go 15%, and you can change it by the color. Maybe add a light yellow back behind it. So now I've got a 15% gradient. In other words, the color's 15% back behind the text. You can darken it as you want, solid or whatever you want to do. We'll stick with the 15%, apply it to the paragraph, and now you can't, you have to look real carefully, and very carefully in the back you can see a slight different tint to this. Or again, you can come up here, Format, Borders and Shading, and you can come up to the color and go solid 100% and make it really snap out at you. Look at that. Now Dan is going to automatically not only look here, he's going to come down here and say, oh, hey, look, here's an important number. And of course, we could then highlight this number and make it even better. We learned about this. Let's do it. You think Dan is going to find that number? I think so. Check and see how paragraph formatting is definitely going to help you snap out some of your writing, whatever it is. People are going to be drawn to it based on how you align your paragraphs and how you direct the text to go back and forth, back and word wrap around, and also maybe you want to do hanging indents, whatever it is. Paragraph formatting is very cool. So what did we accomplish here? Well, we talked a lot about dentures. No, we talked about indents anyway. And indents are really a way for us to go in and set how our text, once we hit enter, where it will appear on the next line. Does it go all the way to the left? Where on the page is it going to align up? Speaking of alignment, we can say, hey, do we align all of our text so that it always starts to the left? Or does it go to the right? So that way it kind of all lines up there. Or do we go in the center? Do we justify? All those options with alignment. And then finally, we finished up with some really cool things like borders, adding a shadow box to it or a 3D box to it. And then add some shading in it to really snap that text out. People go, wow, hey, what's this? This must be important based upon the border and the shading around that particular paragraph. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.